Certainly my last couple of opportunities, there's been a detachment from realism, and that was, like I say, a great grounding for me. And it was tough because if you didn't perform, then questions would be asked, fingers would be pointed, and words would be said. And I went on loan on trial at Lincoln and spent pre-season with them, did really well. Within that honesty, like I've just spoke about, there's so many young players who are just willing to give everything and a little bit more. To sign an 8-year contract, it's more determination length. That's really what your contract length.
Welcome, guys, to the podcast. I'm here with Matthew Taylor. Matthew, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm also really good, thanks. You've obviously been out of work now for about a year or so now. How's that time been for you, and how's that kind of period been as, a manager yourself?
Yeah, just over a year now. An enjoyable time to start with in relation to the family. We welcomed our third child in August. So Connor came safely, and it's been a delight to be around. I've got two other young children as well. So I've spent some fantastic time with the family. Within that time, we've also moved house. We relocated from Bristol back to Sheffield. So lots of family orientated activities, really, I suppose. And then obviously, as the football season started up again in August, and going through sort of the latter months, a clearer focus on what's next and what opportunities might arise, and watching as many games as I possibly can to get a feel for the level and where the leagues are at.
Is it a time where I know a lot of coaches speak about where they feel they're on edge, they just want to get back to work? Has that been the same feeling for you, or you've actually enjoyed this time off to just relax and rejuvenate yourself?
Yeah, there's definitely been a relaxed aspect to it. The first couple of months was a total switch off, just in relation to I'd worked pretty much straight through for best part of 7 years as a manager, and that's quite an intense period over a long period of time. So I probably my body and my mind needed a break. So when I got sacked last December, January and February were very much just total relaxation and switching off from the game itself. But then you do start to look at results. You start to look at league patterns, league tables, teams who are performing, teams who are not performing, the patterns of the league, and you start to get a feel for when the next opportunity is going to come. And probably for the last sort of 6 or 7 months, I've been in that mindset where I'm ready to go back into work. I want to go back into work, but I also am mindful that I want it to be the right opportunity for myself and the football club, whatever club that may be. I really want to work with people who are good people, have got good morals, and I've got a plan as well, and we'll stick to that plan. It's easier said than done in the football world, but people with a clear vision and a clear identity and a way of working. So hopefully the next opportunity will give me the chance to showcase the skills I've got from the experience I've had at managing.
A lot of managers speak about that it has to be the right club, it has to be the right challenge. So what does that look like to you in terms of specifically, in terms of the environment? Is it more of a logistical matter, or does it have to just feel right for you?
Well, the objectives and the aims and the plans, they've just got to be realistic. Certainly my last couple of opportunities, there's been a detachment from realism and the real world, and certainly the footballing world. And I've experienced that firsthand in terms of expectation, know-how, where expertise is placed and where opinion is put as well. So, like I say, you want to work with people who are going to give you the opportunity to manage the way you want to manage, and also then get the players in who probably we all want the team to look like us and reflect us in the best possible way. That's what every manager or head coach wants. He wants his team or his group of players to reflect him in the best possible way. And you always want to work towards that. But whilst you're working towards that, you've got to win games of football. And that's the most important aspect, is being left to your own devices and being allowed to manage in your way so you get the best out of that group in front of you. And if you're able to do that, then it's going to be your opinions and your decisions which are getting judged as opposed to elsewhere.
For sure. I think with this podcast, I like to explore where it all started off. I know a lot of your family played at a professional level. Can you speak about where your first memories of football came from?
Yeah, family orientated. Playing in the back garden or the backyard with my brother, older brother. So you're always striving to not only beat your older brother but be like him. And obviously we had some football in the family. My granddad was a professional player. My uncle played professionally. My brother is a very good football player. And my parents are very passionate about football without probably playing it at a certain level. So it was in our blood straight away. We did it from a young age. And the moment you are old enough to join a local club, whether it's Cubs or, in my situation, it was Burscough Dynamo, the local team, then you start on that pathway of youth football, I suppose. And it takes you all the way to schoolboy level, college, university, whatever the pathway is. And luckily I had a career in the game. But yeah, my earliest memories are probably in the back garden with my brother.
How would you describe yourself as, a younger player? Were you more technically gifted, or was it more of a physical presence?
Well, I certainly wasn't technically gifted, unfortunately. And obviously having a career as a centre half, my skill set was limited, but I quickly figured out how I could use that skill set and how I could be selectable, and how I could be an effective player for any team I was playing in. Like I say, very limited. I knew what I was good at, and once I had that niche in the market, then I almost grew into this personality, this pitch personality, and started to lead change rooms and lead teams who I was playing for, and we had a bit of success. I didn't have a long career. I came into the game late at 24 and then left at sort of 33, so just around the 10-year period. But because I came in a little bit late, I suppose I made the most of the ability I had, made sure I trained as well as I possibly could physically. I got myself in the best shape, and that allowed me to be a certain type of player.
Yeah, but I also want to touch on your route to pro, because I feel like it's very different, it's very unique, but it is also common that there is a large proportion of players that do also take a different route, and maybe the outside world thinks there's only one way, which is the obviously academy way, but you did take a different route. What also lessons did that pass you, and was there a moment of struggle, of maybe a period of time where there's doubt and you had to come through that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the best experiences I got were as a young player, either football or cricket, in a senior changing room. There's no tougher environment than a senior changing room, whether that's non-league football or cricket change room. Just being exposed to being around, you know, not seasoned professionals because they weren't professional, but just people who are serious about the sport they're playing. And when there's 3 points on the line or a game of cricket on the line, just that will to win and that competitive aspect, and your role within the team. And I quickly gained a lot of experience through that in my sort of late teens, in terms of being exposed to that. And that was a fantastic footing, I suppose, for keeping me grounded and keeping me humble, but also making me understand that I needed to contribute in any way I could. And there's various different ways to contribute to a change room and a performance. And that was, like I say, a great grounding for me. And it was tough because if you didn't perform, then questions would be asked, fingers would be pointed, and words would be said. But you had to be resilient enough to come back from that, and use it as fuel for whatever was next.
And then I also want to mention maybe a moment that your family will also treasure in 2003. You and your older brother played at Villa Park, for the FA Trophy versus Tamworth. You obviously won the game. It was actually 400 to 1 odds to win the game, and you did win the game. Can you talk to me a bit about that day, that night, maybe that night later on, but that day itself, and how amazing that felt to win the trophy?
Yeah, that season was just it was a fairy tale. It won't ever be done again. It's probably the equivalent of a bottom end championship, if not a League One team winning the FA Cup. We just went on this incredible run and beat some fantastic teams. We actually beat the holders in Yeovil, who were top of the National League at the time, away from home 2-0. And when that happened, you just sensed something special was happening. Our player manager was Sean Teal, and the final was at Villa Park. It was literally like it was meant to be. Our league form wasn't anything to write home about. We had some talented players, but all of a sudden, this cup run just galvanised the players, the club, the community, the whole area, and it culminated in that day at Villa Park where we beat Tamworth in the final. And I was lucky enough to be on the pitch and playing behind my brother, and to lift that trophy in front of not just your family and friends, but everyone you went to school with, everyone who ever watched you play football growing up, was incredibly special. And at that point, as a sort of 20-year-old, you're probably thinking this is the best it'll ever get in terms of football. But I was then so lucky I had that experience, because that put me in good stead for a professional career which followed.
And after, well, I need to pronounce this right, but after Birkenshire, I think I'm saying that right, maybe.
First go.
Yeah, it was Burscough. There we go. You went on trial with also Lincoln. That was obviously didn't go to plan. Can you talk to me a bit about that kind of period after leaving Bursco and the experiences that you gained from that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a few of us, my brother included. And I went on loan on trial at Lincoln and spent pre-season with them, did really well. They actually offered me a contract, but Bursco asked for fee, even though I was out of contract. Obviously, the rules that there were, Bursco were owed compensation, and the fact that I'd been not only a young player with their academy, their reserve team, and their first team since I was sort of 17. They might have been able to obtain a bit of a fee or a substantial fee at that time for Bursco, but there was no real need for them to do that. So I missed the opportunity to sign at Lincoln. My career would have been totally different. Same situation happened at Morecambe. So all of a sudden I'd been on trial at a couple of professional clubs and done well and knew I was good enough to sign a professional contract. But that kind of was taken away from me. And that was at this time when the decision was made that I'd go to university and try a different route into the professional game.
Yeah, and then after leaving, you went into non-league football again, and you went to Rosendale and also Matlock Town. Again, you go to non-league. Can you talk to me a bit about the also differences that more about the experiences, but also about the mindset gain and also about the vulnerability that you may have experienced and also the mental strength of playing and also the lower leagues at such a young age with big men around you. It's a bit old school, as they say. But can you talk to me a bit about those experiences and also the mindset strength that you gained from that?
Yeah, I mean, physically you have to be able to cope. That's the same in any sport. Even when you're a young lad playing against men, you've got to find a way to physically cope. The mindset aspect, it's easy for me now as a 44-year-old who's been through, had the career I've had to talk about mindset. And, probably if we spoke when I was 20, I might not have known as much about mindset as I do now. So you go through all those experiences. Like I said, I referred to it earlier. The one thing change rooms do when you're a young player and it's a senior change room, it just toughens you up mentally, physically. You show that resilient side. You figure out how you can have a future with that team, have a future in the sport, and understand what your game looks like and understand what brings you success. We've all got different skill sets. We spoke earlier about what I was like as a type of player. It was apparent that if I did those skills, which I was capable of often enough, then people would value me. My teammates would value me, the coaches, the manager would value me, the club would value me, and then you get your rewards off the back of that. So, yeah, there's got to be a little bit of intellect in terms of knowing yourself and knowing what works. And I think I had that probably from a young age, but only from being exposed at a young age as well.
And also, do you think having people around you that were in a similar environment in terms of family, do you think that also plays a part in, helping guide you through those moments?
Yeah, you find your own pathway, but you've got to have the right people around you. No one more important than your family, the people closest to you. So, help, advice, support, discipline, all different ways of them sort of guiding you to where you're meant to be. But you've also got to do it on your own. No one will actually get you where you want to be. If it has to be you. And luckily, generally, I've made the most of what I've had in terms of my playing career, and obviously then coaching and managing after that. But everyone's played a part, but it's still down to yourself. You still have to find a way to be, strong enough in terms of, I mean, people call me stubborn, strong enough, whatever the right word is, that you want to go in your direction, and hopefully people will follow.
Yeah, but you also have to be a bit, I guess, stubborn to really make it high in the game. You have to believe in yourself. You have to have the feeling that you're also good enough. If you don't have that, do you think that you kind of lack, probably a bit of a bit of the mindset that you need that stubbornness. I feel if you look at the top managers and top players in the world, they all have an ego on
Yeah.
them. Is that something that you've kind of not an ego in a bad way, but is that that ego from a young age that I will make it, that I can make it, is that kind of stuck you kind of with you through your management, through your playing career?
Yeah, I mean, stubbornness with yourself because it's whether it's going to the gym or going for a run or going for getting a good night's sleep or not going out on a night out. There's so many reasons for you not to be at your best. And unfortunately for me, sport is physical. So I always made the most out of my body physically. And then tried to upskill myself in any way I possibly could. And I see it now with a lot of not just young players, a lot of players I've coached and managed. There's always something drawing them away from as an excuse as to why they're not actually performing at their best, and sometimes that excuse lies literally at their door. So one thing I was very good at and still feel I'm quite good at is, you know, I'm in control of my destiny, so to speak. I know it's a corny line, I know it's a bit cheesy, but I'm in control of that, and nothing will get in the way, and certainly not myself. And any weakness in terms of my mind, I've just got to shift it out of the way. And I was able to do that as a player, as a coach, and then as a manager. And hopefully, I try and get my players to do something similar.
And I can see your discipline and also the control also combined with you again studying while you were playing. You were doing uni, you were doing that work as maybe a backup plan, maybe, but also I think post career, a lot of players they've obviously retired, then they've still got a large proportion of their life to go. You obviously studied in also Sheffield, Hallam University. I think I'm right there.
Yeah.
Was it How hard was it maybe to balance, the football life and trying to make it as far as you can, and also the education life?
Yeah, well, when I was at Sheffield Hallam, I was still playing semi-professional football. So, you're training twice a week and playing on the weekend. So that really didn't distract from my studies or the educational side of it at all. The biggest sacrifice I made was when I was coming to the end of my playing career and I was at Cheltenham and Newport. I enrolled for a master's at Hartbury College, a master's in coaching science, and alongside that, I coached the football team at Hartbury College. They got a football program which has got some talented players there. So for about 18 months, best part of 2 years, I spent every morning getting up at God knows what time, going to coach the team first thing in the morning, even before it got light, and then going training myself mid-morning, and then going back to the library in the afternoon to do my master's sort of homework and essays and assignments and dissertations. So sort of that for that period, I made a lot of sacrifices. But all of a sudden, I had a master's behind me. I'd carried on being a professional footballer. I had this bank of coaching experience. And you're right to mention it. So many players finish the game and then think, all right, what's next? And I've got no experience to fall back on. I was so lucky that when I came out of the professional game, I've got the best part of 2 years coaching experience and all these qualifications behind me.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that maybe university football is, and it may be also the underrated pathway for players to take? A lot of players just again seem to think that there's one way of making it. If you look at one thing, and also Dubai that they emphasize on big time with obviously youth football, is that there's the USA scholarships, and a lot of players will go over to USA. They'll study, they'll play at a really good also level. Is there a combination of where schools maybe need to, and maybe football clubs need to do more to combine both, or they need to maybe reach, clubs need to have more of a role in that?
It's an interesting question. Well, going back 20 years, when I got my opportunity for university football, at that time there was a lot of, you know, programs, university programs which were football centred, the likes of Loughborough, Team Bath. There were some Welsh universities doing the same. There was probably a dozen or so universities which had full-time football programs. Obviously not playing in a full-time level, but playing university level, and some played in on a Saturday league as well. I was part of the Team Bath programme, who obviously had a good university team, but had an excellent Saturday team playing in the Southern Premier League as well. They got to National League South level. So it gives you a bit of an idea that that's not a million miles away from the professional game itself. And most of the cohorts, so to speak, are made up of players who've come out of the game as a late team or as a first or second year pro. So serious footballers, but for whatever reason didn't quite make it at the grade at that time as a professional footballer, and have fallen back onto the university system, which has provided them still with full-time training every single day, a great opportunity in terms of the games program, and an education to back it up. And the lucky ones out of some of them will have gone back into professional game and had a fantastic career. And I was lucky enough to be one of those. And there's various examples of that. The likes of Robbie Simpson, Neil Saunders, Mark Cannon, people like that who've been through that. And there's countless names who've probably had the educational background. And I also feel it probably allows them to understand the game a little bit more and be better, easily coached when they go back into the professional game.
So that's something that, as a head and also a manager, that maybe you've had to maybe you maybe said that to maybe one of the youth players, or you've maybe had that conversation about your own experience because you've experienced that kind of background? Would you be someone that really puts that point to them?
Yeah, we encourage education. You'd be surprised actually the amount of players who are doing part-time degrees, qualifications, getting certificates of some sort alongside playing. It's probably not well enough documented or publicised, but there's hundreds and hundreds of players who are doing that. And when you're a professional footballer, you've got quite a lot of free time. Some of it is misspent, but if you needed to do half an hour studying a day, that's not too much in terms of when you probably finished at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and got to rest in terms of free time. And if you can get a qualification like a degree alongside a professional career in football, then you're already in a good position for like I say, for when you finish playing.
When I move on to your move to Exeter City in 2007, it felt like a real step up at that time. You're going from non-league to obviously the professional. Well, I think you were still in the club was still in or also non-league at that point, but then you obviously came to the club. You won obviously the playoffs. But can you talk to me about how that move came about? And you were your first year there, you obviously won obviously the playoffs, and how good that first year was for you.
Yeah, I mean, it came through university football. So I played for the England university team, which at the time was managed by Paul Tisdale and Jed Roddy,
Yep.
who led the Team Bath football program. They invited me down to Team Bath to sign for them and do further qualifications at Bath University. In that time, and this is a sliding doors moment, I was looking at Paul Tisdale got the Exeter City job. And so a year later, after a year of his tenure, he signed me, and they were in the National League at that point. And obviously just mentioned there our first season culminated in us winning at Wembley in the playoff final. We beat Cambridge 1-0. Yeah, so that first season, if the Bursko story was a fairy tale, that first season at Exeter was just incredible, because we had ups and downs throughout that season. We beat Torquay famously in the playoff semi-finals in two incredible games, the most incredible games I've ever played in and watched, let alone as a player, but even as a coach or a manager. And then the final was actually a poor final, but we won 1-0, and that's all you care about when you play at Wembley. And all of a sudden, in 12 months on from being a student, I'm playing League Two football, and leading the club, which was just incredible.
You had a fantastic time there, and then you moved on to yours to Charlton Athletic. You were made vice captain immediately by Chris Powell there. Can you talk to me about that kind of responsibility changing? And by being vice captain, by having that lead leadership responsibility, do you think even at that time you had an idea of maybe being a manager even at that time? And can you talk to me a bit about that whole period working under Chris Powell, a highly respected coach?
Yeah, I mean, I'd had like 2.5 years of captaining Exeter, so I was probably seen as that sort of figure in the change room. I obviously signed for Charlton, who had Johnny Jackson, who was the main man at Charlton, and that was fantastic. So I was more than happy to be his vice and vice captain for the club. But we also had a fantastic team at Charlton. Chrissy Powell put together a team of players who were just hell bent on getting out of League One, and we did that with a record points total, got over 100 points and won a strong league comfortably. And that was a fantastic time because Charlton, when the club's doing well, is a big club, ex-Premier League club, and obviously, you're playing in front of 20,000 plus people week in, week out, and the support was just incredible. And you learn a lot about how you put a team together, the qualities needed in terms of inside the change room and then on the pitch, and how you maintain that for a successful season, and then obviously at championship level as well. So I learned an awful lot from Chrissy Powell at that stage, and I was probably 29, 30 years of age, so I probably knew that I was only a few years away from football finishing. So I wasn't coaching actively, but I was certainly looking at ways to lead, and maybe a future in coaching or management at some stage.
And then obviously after that, you did mention there that you're coming to the end of your career. Maybe that's how you felt. You were obviously trying to plan ahead. You obviously then moved to obviously Bradford. You had a few injury problems. Was that, would I say, in framing, your toughest moment of maybe your career, because of the age and because of that point in your career?
Yeah, look, we spoke about how I've always used my physicality. I had a foot injury at Bradford. It was an injury I got earlier in my career at Exeter, and it just reoccurred. I'd always managed it pretty well and always played in a little bit of pain, but I had to have a second operation while I was at Bradford. And the surgeon just said to me, because he put a pin in one of the joints in my foot, and it's my right foot, and the foot I not only kick a ball with, but push off when I'm jumping and turning, and any sort of drive patterns. So he said, "You've not got long left in the game." And probably after that, I just lost a little bit of push inside my lower limbs, literally probably because of pain, because of lack of strength. My game had to change a little bit, and I certainly wasn't the same player from that point on. But also then I was involved in certain situations and scenarios where if your body's not quite right and the club's struggling as well, it's such a difficult hill to climb. And then you got to go back on your experience and what you stand for as a person. And from Bradford to then Cheltenham and Newport, none of those three clubs were particularly successful for me. But I didn't play often enough or as much as I'd liked, mainly because my body wouldn't allow it.
During that period of time where you didn't play as much, were you actively focused on what was that a period where you were thinking, okay, what's next now? And you were studying or you were reaching out, you were networking. Was that period, or were you more still focused? Okay, I need to recover. I need to get back playing.
Yeah, at Bradford, I was focused. I've always been focused in terms of returning from injury, but at Bradford, my focus was just my body and getting it right and getting back fit again. But the moment I moved to Cheltenham and then obviously Newport and had the coaching and studying alongside it, I had other things to focus my time and effort on. But I still wanted to be playing football at the weekend. I was club captain at Cheltenham. Terry Butcher signed me at Newport. I was desperate to play under him. I actually did play a game for him. He got sacked before I came back to fitness. So it was such a shame that the last couple of years were like they were, but still beneficial because not everyone's experience is a positive one. Not everyone's experience in sport and in life is brilliant and one to look back on fondly. But sometimes those experiences teach you the most. Teach you the most about yourself first and foremost, and then obviously other people. So yeah, certainly when I was at Cheltenham and Newport, I learned so much about myself and what I needed to or what I wanted to do next.
And after that, you moved. Your first coaching experience, I guess, was at Bath, where you were player coach. Can you talk to me a bit about that kind of transition? What you learned in that period, who you were learning off, and then obviously moving on to the manager job. But let's just focus on that Bath stint. How important was that for you?
Yeah, it was important. It was just, further experience. I can't say I coached much because, when you're involved in a non-league team, you probably got 2 nights a week, if that. And the manager will take most of the training session, and training time is limited. But you're still learning about games. You're still learning about football. The biggest bank of experience I was getting was leading the Hartbury College football program at senior level. So the senior group were university students, and that was a full-time program. So that was the biggest bank of coaching experience I was getting at the time, which taught me the most about how to lead sessions, how to put together a team, and then the Bath City bits and pieces almost followed that. And like I said, with that, all of a sudden, that experience which I've had for over an 18-month period, I was well equipped to go back into the professional game.
I know Paul, sorry, or more so Paul Tinsdale was a big figure for you at Exeter City when obviously you were a player, and then obviously replacing him as also a manager after a long time at also the club. You got the job. Can you talk to me about pre also getting the job, how you found out about the position, where you having also conversations with Paul, and a bit about kind of that whole period of time and how that felt for you?
Yeah, well, I've been back at Exeter for 18 months in a coaching capacity. So I was first team coach, but headed up the 21s, and sort of managed or ran their 21s team as well. And the club got to the playoff final. But in the build up to the playoff final, there was so much uncertainty in terms of Paul's future and what was next for the football club. And we got beat convincingly by Coventry, I'm afraid. We got beat 3-1 at Wembley. And I think it was 4 or 5 days later, it was announced that Paul would be moving and going to MK Dons. He took some staff with him. We had a discussion about whether I'd go with him as well. But I suppose I was in the right place at the right time. And the fact that I played and captained Exeter City, and then obviously been there in a coaching capacity and done relatively well with the 21s and the first team for the last 18 months, put me in a good position. The fact that we got to the playoff final as well, pre-season was starting in 4 weeks. So there was probably a little bit of not desperation, but the need to get someone in post and someone who was familiar with the club and what was needed. So I was in the right place at the right time, and I wanted to make the most of that opportunity. So I was delighted to get offered the opportunity to do that. And you know, the rest is just where you want to take a club and a team when it's given to you.
Did you feel the weight of the job in terms of Paul's there for a long time? It's your first job and also management. Of course, you felt the weight, but can you talk to me a bit about specifics on if was there a moment where you looked yourself in the mirror and that you were a bit like, whoa, was there one of those moments, or were you fairly okay with that, with that transition?
No, I was okay with it. I think because, like I just alluded to, the pre-season was a month away. We didn't have a big enough squad. There was players leaving. We had to get straight down to work, and it was literally you're the manager. That's your job. Get to work. And the fact that there was just no time involved or no time to think probably made it easier and took a little bit of the pressure off because if you sat there thinking, oh, I'm taking over someone who's done so well at the club for 12 years, he's built the club to what it is today, then you might be daunted by it and you might start doubting yourself. I didn't have time for those thoughts at that moment in time. I remember within days of being announced as manager, we were selling a player to Preston North End, and I was on the phone dealing with Peter Risdale, and you're just straight away on this hamster wheel, which is management. And it was a great place to be and one which I really enjoyed. But I also felt I'd have the respect of the playing group and the players who were already there, and players who I'd worked with previously, some players who I'd even played with. So I think they knew what I was like as a character, knew what to expect from me. And I was very clear in terms of which sort of direction we wanted to go to. And luckily we got a good enough team on the pitch.
You had a really good start, of course, winning I'm obviously manager of the month and obviously just missing out on also the playoffs in obviously your first year there. Was there also a feeling, just going back to that, also previous point about the club, was it the right club as well because of the fact that is obviously supporter trust owned, it's a really sustainable model there. And, some clubs may have not made that kind of decision. They may have gone for experience, but they gave you the chance, and it seems to me that the feeling of also the club that they give people a chance, whether that's young players coming through or maybe coaches as well.
Yeah, well, I certainly knew the identity and the ethos of the club better than anyone. I wanted to stick by that and give young players the opportunity. It has to happen at Exeter City because there's no chairman, there's no money man putting money in. It's a trust-owned club like we spoke about. So we have to sell players, and we have to get young players from the academy onto the pitch. That's our way of working, and it's worked fantastically well for a long period of time, even before my time with Paul as well. And since I've left, so I knew Exeter City. Exeter City probably knew me. Was a familiarisation with each other in relation to that, and I wanted to continue that. And certainly, I think there's more understanding when that's your ethos and that's your identity. If there's so many professional clubs who are just desperate for quick success and quick fixes and plough a lot of money in and then don't get the results and then probably change their manager in quick succession over a short period of time and got no stability. I think it's fair to say Exeter City, Paul Tisdale was there for 12 years, I was there for 4.25 years, and Gary Cordwell's been there since I left. So there's a real aspect of sustainability and calmness and control and giving people time. And the club is still seen as a success. It's the envy of so many other clubs in the football pyramid, but very few clubs actually adhere to working in that way.
It's hard to get the balance right though, but because obviously the model is really, really strong and it's well known and it's really sustainable and there's no kind of financial problems there. But is there also, as a manager, at times when you're doing well and you want to kick on to maybe the championship or that kind of pyramid, is there a rush? Do you feel that you maybe want to squeeze in one more transfer, or you want to get this player in, but the club's like, this is our model, we're actually going to stick to it? So do you think it's about getting the balance right from your experiences there?
Yeah, but there was a simplistic aspect to Exeter City and being manager there. There's your budget, spend it how you will, how you see fit. You're in control of it. But that's the budget. It ain't going to change. We're going to take money away from you or add money at the last minute. And we won't be involved in terms of who you're signing, who you're buying, and what the profile of the player is. It's down to you. not many clubs work like that, and it made it was so simple and it was so effective, and you were able to really showcase if you were a good coach or a good manager or not with working under those parameters. And then off the back of that, you also need a little bit of luck. Don't forget that 18 months into my tenure at Exeter City, COVID happened. And then for the next sort of year, 18 months after that, we were playing football pretty much behind closed doors. But for the club to come through that in actually a stronger position than what they went into it was incredible in terms of sacrifices we made, the investment we put into young players. And it all culminated in the promotion season with a squad, an actual playing team of over 60% academy players, which is absolutely incredible. And that made it even more special when the fans came back into the stadiums that we were able to enjoy that success together.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess the COVID season really did show how the model was working. A lot of clubs, of course, struggled and are still struggling from that. But I have for that kind of clarity, that this is the model and this is how we're going to work for a period of time. That obviously massively helped. Can you talk to me a bit about the obviously promotion season? And a massive achievement for the club, for the city itself. Can you talk to me about that whole season itself? And we talk a lot about in also sport now and in life about high performance and about what are the key ingredients to that. What were the key kind of ingredients to that team and why it ticked?
It was the most honest team I've ever had. And within that honesty, like I've just spoke about, there's so many young players who are just willing to give everything and a little bit more. And we were able to manufacture some seniority and some players around those younger ones who had a fantastic skill set. And the balance of the squad and the team on the pitch was so effective. Our form post Christmas, I think we only lost 3 games after Christmas. We went on an incredible run, and first half of the season we're kind of finding our feet a little bit and finding out about each other and the league. But after Christmas, we just went on this incredible run, and we were a real force and played attractive football, scored a lot of goals, was so tough as a group, which was incredible for a group of young players. And it just built and built and built. And sometimes you stood there as a coach or as a manager and you're onto a good thing. And that's an incredible feeling. And it's an incredible feeling to have where you've got full trust in everyone around you, and most importantly, the players out in front of you. And I certainly had that season, and the start of the following season at League One level as well, because I knew what I'd get out of this group of players was absolutely everything, and I also knew they had enough skill set, or we had enough skill set collectively to win games of football.
I was watching a documentary and also Burnley, and Scott Parker was speaking to his team about as a coach, the most important thing that you also look at a group of players, you look at a group of men and that they're going to fight through a brick wall for the football club and also for you and your teammates as well. Does that translate to that squad yourself? You've just referenced that, of course you have, but is that kind of mirrored there with that team?
Yeah, yeah. And they were humble. They were good people. They were people you'd want to spend time with. We had we had confidence, and we had, never bordering arrogance, but we had, a bit of an ego about us because we all wanted to be successful. But as much as there's a team ethic, and people always allude to it in team environments where it's still down to the individuals. It's down to the individual to buy into getting the absolute maximum out of themselves and their teammate alongside them. And if people are doing that, and you've got a group of people doing that, and they just drag people with each other, and that's what we had that season. And you always see the successful teams have that. There never has been a successful sporting team with a weak mentality or no resilience or no team ethic or no spirit or no good people. Skill can only get you so far, but certainly in terms of lower league football and League Two as it was at Exeter at the time, our substance was outstanding. It was a deeper bowl of substance than I'd ever experienced before. And that's always something else I'll strive to get back to.
And then obviously the next season, you obviously got the permission to speak to Rotherham United. Of course, they're in the Championship at the time. They're obviously fighting relegation. What was the thought process behind the decision to leave at that time when things were going well? You're in a stable club to go to a club that may be fighting relegation. It's a new environment. What was the thought process at that specific time?
Yeah, I was at the point where, I'd had 10 years at Exeter, 4 years as a player, 2 years coaching, and 4 and a bit years as manager. And that was a long time, and that was a massive commitment. And we're inside the top 10 in League One, a really attractive and a team full of assets. But I knew there was a ceiling in terms of where the club was at, and I'd had a couple of conversations with other clubs in that off season, and things hadn't quite materialised. And then naturally, when you're ambitious, you start asking yourself the question, what's the next opportunity going to look like? And at the point Rotherham came in, I think there was a couple of other championship jobs where there'd been conversations but no interview process. So this was the first time I actually got to speak to a championship club face to face and have an interview with them. And look, I knew the history of Rotherham, I knew the history of Rotherham at championship level, but I just saw it as a fantastic challenge and one which I felt that if we got things right, similar to what we'd done at Exeter, we could do something special, and we actually did in my first season. To keep Rotherham in a championship at the first attempt was just absolutely incredible. But I should have understood the bigger picture in terms of expectation and reality a little bit more than I did.
There's only two other managers that have also done that. That's also Neil Warnock and Steve Evans. So you are the third one there. So it just shows how big of an achievement that was at that time of that play, maybe that squad and the also investment and also the championship at that time and also the era that also was in. What were the feelings? Because you're saying that was a massive achievement. Do you think that same feeling of when you look back on your when you look back towards the date, that was as big of an achievement as always a promotion, just because of the magnitude?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's bigger. Keeping Rotherham in the Championship was a bigger footballing achievement than getting Exeter City promoted. But promotion, you get all the attention, whereas if you just survive and you retain your league status, it's not seen or spoke about in the same light. But certainly to do what we did at Rotherham in that first season, that was my biggest on-pitch achievement in terms of my managerial career. And that's for the club at the time. But we got to 50 points at championship level. We won some incredible games of football. We beat some incredible teams. You just spoke about it. The strength of the league was absolutely incredible. We finished above Cardiff and QPR. The relegated teams, the likes of Wigan and Blackpool and Reading. These are proper clubs. And Rotherham, with no disrespect, I'm always going to be a League One club trying to stay at championship level. So to do that and to get to that points total was absolutely incredible. But I probably should have looked a little bit deeper into then, once you've had that success, then where the bar is and the expectations.
Obviously, you were sacked in also next season early on in also November. Is it sort of feeling where you thought it was coming, or did you maybe feel a bit kind of surprised by the timing of it?
No, I was surprised. I was disappointed. I was angry, upset, all those emotions because obviously the manager who'd been there previously had all these promotions and all these relegations and never lost his job. And I'd done something the season before, keeping the club in the league, where all of a sudden I'm thinking, Rav, got a little bit of money in the bank. It's going to be difficult again this season. It's always going to be difficult, Rotherham at championship level. But I'm going to get time to, get to the deeper end of this season. So to lose my job after 14, 15 games, it was a surprise. I had an inkling on the back of two games before that we got beaten by Sheff Wednesday and we actually performed really poorly. I'll never forget it. We'd just beaten Coventry in midweek leading into the game and we were in a good place as a group. And 10 minutes into the game, we conceded and we just went. And sometimes, I spoke about when you know your team's in the right place in that promotion season, we went in that game and we couldn't afford to go in that game because that's the local derby. Sheffield Wednesday against Rotherham. They're not fond of each other in any way, and that's a big judgment. And I knew for the remaining 80 minutes of that game, our performance was going to put me in trouble. But we came back with a couple of draws in the next couple of games. We drew a game against Ipswich and QPR, but then we got beat heavily at Watford. So you always know that some things might come at a certain stage. But I was certainly surprised and disappointed when it actually happened. And then obviously you look at what's to come after you leave. And the way their form went downhill from that point, and their points tally went downhill, and what happened to the club after that is a real shame.
Also you look at your contract. Is until 2026, so that's a long term deal. So there's even more reference there. If you've just been at a club there that is really really sustainable and really stable in their kind of model. They do things in a very kind of particular way, but they're really consistent with that. But then you've got a long term deal. So do you think were you a bit more surprised by that aspect. You know, you obviously sign a long-term deal. You know, there's obviously a commitment with also the club for that, and then obviously not even 2 years in, you've just achieved a fantastic achievement a year or so before. And then the next few months, and then you're sacked.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I've got to be honest. In the managerial world, you could sign an 8-year contract.
Yeah.
It's more the termination length. That's really what your contract length is. So in terms of, there's no security when you sign a longer deal. The only security is ultimately what your termination clause is in relation to your contract. So, but certainly one of the main reasons I took the job at Rotherham, that even if we got relegated in that first season, and at whatever stage it was going to come, because inevitably we were always going to be in that area of the league or that position of the league table. Judging by the history of the club, managers weren't losing a job because of that. So I was different, or seen differently by the chairman. But we certainly had it was a great club to work for, but difficult in so many ways. And you'll know from this conversation, I'm very straight in terms of the way I speak, and maybe some of the communication I used in certain moments, and the need to want to improve certain areas of the club and elements of the club. Didn't go down too well in certain moments, and it certainly cost me in terms of my job.
Moving on to also Bristol Rovers, a massive club, you know, a huge club that's been underperforming for a while now. But you join the club in also your first month, you get one of the nominees for manager of also the month. Talk to me a bit about you. You worked at a stable, you know, it's really stable club before, but and of course you don't know at that time what's obviously going to happen. But you're walking into, you know, a club right now that's really struggling at this moment. But at that time, they were also really struggling. What was the key message into the board that kind of convinced you to join, and you felt that this was the right project for you?
Yeah, it's a long story. I'll keep it as short as I possibly can. Similar to the Rotherham one, and both times I've probably made a mistake in terms of this. You look at what's happened previously, and the co-owner at the time had obviously worked alongside Joey Barton for a long period of time and stuck by him through thick and thin when their form was up and down, and was so consistent in terms of his messages. And I kind of took the job to work for him, but the fact that he was co-owner and there was another aspect of the ownership, which actually then took the whole ownership over, meant that it was difficult to say the least. And you go in, football's always a learning game, and you never stop learning. But I went in under the remit of one man who I wanted to work for and wanted to work with, and felt we could achieve something special, and ended up working for and with other people. And it never really, the moment I walked in that building, never really felt quite right. Influences on and off the pitch, which were out of my control. It was an incredible club, because you're right to say it's a big club, but it's not been a big club for a long time, and it will remain in a position it is, unfortunately. It's gone downhill since I left, because it's just not quite functioning in the way it should be. There's so many reasons for that, and probably I was part of that for a small period of time. But a lot of things changed whilst I was there.
And I guess from those experiences, that when we started this, and you're saying you want to find the right club for these reasons, that's probably stronger now, do you think, than also ever before? You know, we're talking about the magnitude of two big clubs, but it's not just about the magnitude of the club in terms of history, but it has to feel right for you, going also forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a risk involved, and there's always an unknown, because no matter what the situation is, you never fully know until you're in it. It's like when you sign a player, you never fully know what that player is quite going to be like until you spend time on the training pitch or in the changing room, coaching them. You never fully know. You can get all the references in the world and the opinion from a lot of people, and look at the experience and history, but you never actually fully know. So there's always an element of risk. But I suppose one thing I've learned is to not conduct myself in a different way, but ask questions earlier on, find out where, not the power is, but who's making the decisions. Recruitment is always a major part. Who's involved in recruitment? What is the process in relation to that? What is the ethos of the club? What is the direction of the club? Do the club want to be, a club which brings through their academy players like Exeter City, or the remit of Bristol Rovers? Towards the end was sign young players from the league below who've had success and see if you can make them into League One players and sellable assets. But then you have to understand what that looks like for you, and not let anything of that bigger picture take your eye off the next game. And unfortunately, at Bristol Rovers, everything took away from the next game and winning the next game.
Fantastic, Matt. So we're going to move on to three really quick fire questions for you. These are from fans and these are a bit from me as well. Firstly, what is the best also atmosphere that you've also managed in?
Best atmosphere I've managed in. Well, Sheffield United was a great atmosphere. We won 1-0 on the night, and it was great atmosphere because great performance from ourselves. But they were towards the top end of the table. They were getting promoted. Those bigger clubs at the time who were close to promotion, Sheffield United going there, Burnley going there under Vincent Company. They were great atmospheres. Playing wise, walking out of Leeds, first game of the season, I've not heard noise like that. That was just incredible. So, a lot of those clubs with the history and the size and the stature. But then you can go to some grounds, and off the top of my head, going to Tranmere, when Tranmere get ahead of steam, their fan base is second to none, and can be absolutely excellent. And it's a lot of northern clubs, and maybe something I can relate to more than anyone else being a northern lad. Northern clubs for me seem to make a little bit more noise than the southern ones, and northern supporters do, and know how to really get behind a team and make it a hard atmosphere to perform in. And when you stood there, either as a manager or as a coach, it's great to just sort of take it all in and soak it all. And when you're a player, you only really notice it at the start. You don't notice it from that point on.
What is a manager that's influenced you and has been a big factor in your coaching career?
All of them, from Paul Tisdale to Chrissy Powell to Phil Parkinson. The five I had in a year at Cheltenham, Terry Butcher, even though I didn't play with him, the three or four after that at Newport. Every single one of them has. Paul Tisdale I spent the most amount of time with, so I understood his ways of working better than anyone else. And that probably was a nice balance in relation to where Chrissy Powell was, because Chrissy Powell wasn't as tactically minded as Paul was, but in terms of his management skills and his personality, he was an incredible guy to be around. But also, it's not just the manager; it's the team around the manager, away from the actual playing team, the assistant, the first team coach, the goalkeeper coach, the physios, the S&C, how that blend of personalities and people work together with their own different skill sets to give that group of players absolutely everything: laughter, humility, discipline, ideas, tactics, whatever you want, motivation, whatever you want, and whatever is needed at certain times. Different people can do different things. So yeah, I learned an awful lot from all of them. But I suppose I'm most familiar with Paul because I spent the most amount of time with him.
Fantastic. And also, lastly, what are your three non-negotiable behaviours as a manager?
Give absolutely everything. Be humble. I use that word an awful lot. I'd like my players to be humble because it means they give me everything, and they don't just give me everything. They give the team everything. They don't just give the team everything. They give themselves everything. I like people like that. Being respectful, really clear in terms of understanding your environment, being a good person away from football, away from whatever sport it is you're playing. And then also the third aspect is I quickly need them to understand what their skill set is and where they fit into the team. I spoke about a niche in the market and how I found my niche in the market quite early as a player. That's something where conversations, communication, everything I do with certain players is if you do this or these skill sets on the pitch, then I can fit you into my team and I can balance you off with other players. And getting the players to accept that, understand it, buy into it, be enjoying being that type of player and being what's expected from them. But then also having that as a benefit for their career is something where I'm trying to think of the best word for it. Being understanding of what they are and not having an ego or understanding their own capabilities is the best way for me to describe it.
Sure. Matt, thank you very much. We're now close to the hour. So that's been, a fantastic, chat. And again, I think I've spoken to you a lot now, and what strikes me most about you is that you're authentic, that you're always yourself. Again, you're really straight, also talking, but again, you're also got that kind and caring side to you, which I've seen in obviously the last few weeks. So again, I really, really appreciate your time, and it's been a fantastic, to chat with you.
No problem. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.